Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be taking a look at the dollar flu virus, also known as the green poison, which devastated New York City as seen in the 2016 action role-playing game, The Division. Believed to have been manufactured to bring about Armageddon, the dollar flu was comprised of at least 6 other pathogens, including, but not limited to, Ebola, H1N1, swine flu, and the hantavirus, which were all bonded together and synthesized with an artificial variant of smallpox to form a supervirus known as the dollar flu, which decimated the world's population. The virus was essentially created by a scientist named Gordon Amherst, who believed that humanity had become too powerful and greedy on a global scale, and as a result had subsequently surpassed the natural constraints of viruses that Mother Nature had once used to control the world population. Inspired by pathogens like the Black Death, which destroyed 60% of Europe's population in the 1300s, and Spanish influenza, which wiped out over 50 million people in 1918, Amherst believed that the only way to put humanity in check was to create a potent supervirus and release it onto the unsuspecting world. I mean, breakthroughs in medicine like the invention of penicillin in the 1920s enabled people to directly fight viral infections. The creation of vaccines and the development of advanced technologies like the MRI have allowed us to literally live twice as long now than people did just over 100 years ago. And though I agree to a certain extent with Amherst and Agent Smith that we as a species don't really live in harmony with our environment and are probably akin to a virus ourselves, what Amherst ended up doing was unforgivable. With breakthroughs in medical technologies that allowed for the digitization of DNA, the process of growing a generation of lab-grade pathogens was sped up by a factor of 1,000. Intrigued by this innovation, Gordon began emulating the work of Vitaly Tachenko, another scientist and former colleague who had been experimenting with virus genomes in virtual space. Vitaly's plan was to deconstruct the genome of dangerous pathogens like smallpox and make them both less deadly and more fertile, hoping that this would help eradicate some of the world's most pernicious diseases. Amherst, however, corrupted this concept and took it in the opposite direction to create an even more deadly virus. After virtually combining the multiple virus strains, Gordon then fed these results into a complex industrial protein replicator and synthesized the first sample of the green poison.
And the idea has been around for years. Genome as data. You see, once we digitized DNA, we made it infinitely mutable. We could do 1,000 virtual variations in the time it used to take to grow a 1 lab-grade generation of pathogens. And we could pick the best, most lethal combinations.
Studying the evolution and transmission of the smallpox virus by using Tachenko's digitalized samples, Gordon noted it would take 1 to 2 weeks before it would begin incubating in a host, and during this time, the virus was not contagious. Wanting his green poison, which would later become known as the dollar flu, to be as effective as possible, Amherst perfected his pathogen and made it extremely infectious, whilst also managing to speed up its incubation period to ensure that most people didn't even know they were sick at the time that they were most contagious. All of these factors enabled the virus to spread across the country and even globally within days, as people who became symptomatic assumed their fever and body aches were the result of the common flu. This in turn created a nightmare scenario for medical personnel and first responders, who unwittingly became infected due to inadequate quarantine procedures, leading to the collapse of all medical infrastructures. Even after they realized they weren't dealing with the common flu, not much could really be done to fight the infection, as Gordon had engineered the dollar flu to rapidly adapt and mutate, making it extremely difficult for antibodies and experimental drugs to fight it off. As the virus continued to mutate within the host body, the hosts began experiencing more symptoms including coughs, skin blisters, and internal bleeding. And with a 95% mortality rate, only a handful of people ended up surviving the bioengineered outbreak.
Welcome back, I'm Rick Falassi, and you lucky bastards are listening to Wouldn't You Know It. And if you're listening, that means you really are a lucky bastard. You apparently won the genetic lottery and can't catch the green poison like 95% of the rest of humanity. You got to sit around eating bonbons, watching people you loved wither and die and get wrapped in hefty bags and dumped in a mass grave with no funeral or gravestone or nothing. Yeah, we got a golden ticket, didn't we?
Driven by his hatred of humanity, whom he believed were corrupted and greedy, the mad scientist began infecting banknotes with his virus. As victims began to fall directly after coming into contact with his infected notes, the term dollar flu started being used colloquially to describe Amherst's virus. I also thought it was interesting that Gordon admired the work of Charles Darwin and was a strong believer in natural selection, who held that although much of the world population would die as a result of his virus, the strongest of our species would survive. He held this view so strongly that he even infected himself to see which side of the spectrum he fell into, eventually succumbing to the effects of the virus and dying in his laboratory. One of the most ruthless pathogens to be featured in games, the dollar flu is a striking reminder of the dangers of playing God through genetic manipulation, with a violent depiction of a lawless post-apocalyptic New York City which had torn itself apart. I've been meaning to do a video on the dollar flu for some time, and with the release of the new trailer for the sequel a few days ago, I thought now would be a perfect time as any. Scheduled to drop in 2019, I hope The Division 2 will give us some more information on the current state of the world, and will hopefully reveal whether or not a cure has been created. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at the dollar flu virus featured in The Division. If there's any other stuff you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Nihat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Times change, and sometimes Mother Nature needs a hand in improving her creations. Like, say, speeding them up a little bit, making them contagious when they should be quietly incubating in a host, or making them more lethal. A funny thing happened on the way to $100 genome maps and 3D printed plastic toys. Someone figured out those technologies could be repurposed, modified for the greater good. Me. If, by some miracle, you survive green poison, then nature's decided you deserve to live. The rest of us shouldn't and won't. Godspeed. I'll see you in hell.